All right. Got it. Got it. Whatever happened to okay, So hey everyone. My name is Brad. Talking a little bit about this subject. It's a pretty broad subject, but I guess what I mean by word buy-in is sort of like acceptance and support from management to product teams and of course engineers across the org. A lot to talk about on this subject, but I think hopefully most of you or some of you will get something out of this. Kind of go into our journey, how we kind of went through this in the past 2 years. First, a little bit about myself. I'm Brad, live with my family right outside of Philadelphia, Bucks County. Go Phils. I've worked in a lot of different industries, finance, media, logistics, you name it. It's kind of the one thing I've always liked about engineering, just flexibility, being able to hop around to different problems and learn all kinds of crazy things. So my journey started in 2019 at Gopuff when the tech org was about 30 engineers. We're roughly in like the 500 range now. So, going through that hyper growth was pretty interesting and crazy. I've worked on a few different product teams in the, at Gopuff, warehousing, started off there, routing for delivery. And I've always been somewhat of a data nerd myself. Worked in data viz, working on like data analytics and lots of anything with data is I'm usually drawn to. So now a little bit of an overview. First, I'm just going to go into a little bit about what Gopuff is, then kind of our journey into SRE and how we got started. Third, a little bit about open telemetry. And fourth, we'll get into how we turned incidents into a crucial or helpful feedback loop for continuous improvement. 5, how our service catalog leveled up our automations, and then we'll get into some QA. All right. So a little bit about Gopuff. As promised, the Gopuff started in 2013 by two college roommates with a mission, two Drexel roommates with a mission to create the instant needs market. From a customer perspective, we're an instant delivery company, but really we are e-commerce, supply chain, logistics, and of course, 30-minute delivery company. Now, by that, I mean that, this is all possible because due to our vertically integrated business model, where we deliver from the Gopuff operated fulfillment centers, as opposed to other companies that just do the deliveries. We actually have warehouses all over the world. We're mainly in the US and the UK, but we are global. All this makes Gopuff pretty challenging and fun place to work at. A ton of stuff to break, lots of problems to solve. Okay. So in 2020, like I was saying, early 2020, we experienced a ton of growth and, like a lot of delivery companies did. And so when the pandemic hit, like many of us, engineering had to quickly transition to working remotely. At that time, I was working on the warehouse side, and my focus was on scaling and reliability, mainly due to the hypergrowth we were seeing week over week. However, we found it very challenging to alert and visualize events with the tools we had at the time. Not to throw any shade, but a lot of the cloud provided telemetry or alerting tools aren't that great. The main challenge is, we had lots of different logs to sift through. We had different systems, Kibana, App Insights, you name it. Multiple query languages to learn. And overall, like these tools lack structure and traceability across other services. Another big one was just a lack of shareability of the charts and monitors. Sounds like a small thing, but just the ability, like, especially when you're all remote, like to be able to send something over Slack so someone can, you don't have to paint them a picture and draw a diagram for every kind of data viz, like the fact that you can get to that data, see what's going on, and help contribute to the issue that's, the incident that's going on. But overall, the bar was just too high for a lot of engineers to get value out of these tools, which, by the way, were getting very, very pricey, because a lot of them just don't have many cost controls with ingestion and indexing. So your costs can be very prohibitive pretty quickly. Sum up, we were really struggling as an org with the observability, creating effective monitors, sharing data, and there was just a lot of work to do. So now it's early 2021, and I was challenged personally with starting the SRE team at Gopuff, and to build a team of engineers to tackle our reliability issues, which, by the way, were getting more and more costly as each day went by. So some of the challenges we had, during incidents, we struggled a lot with a lack of just what was going on, just observability. It was tough to actually determine the customer impact during an incident. That was a big one. So, this often led to just mass confusion, improper mitigations, rolling stuff back and rolling it forward, and just long recovery times, right? We also had too much reliance on certain engineers always being available. I don't know if you've ever felt that pain, but having data siloed and only certain engineers knowing the intricacies of some project was pretty painful. But so we had lots of changes going on and just not a clear place to track them, right? That was kind of another big piece of it. So it was painfully clear that we needed a common platform for collecting, visualizing, and sharing telemetry data. Now, obviously there's a big Datadog logo here. I did this talk at the Datadog conference, but I think a lot of these things do apply to other observability platforms. New Relic, Splunk, you name it. A lot of the concepts I'll probably talk about are pretty cross, pretty common practices. So we had a few other challenges when we started in 2021. We were planning a major expansion of our network in the US and Europe. So due to this, we had to grow our engineering org at that time from about 150 to 500 engineers. So to get things started, our main focus was to wrangle all the telemetry being created across the org. And this is really where Datadog seemed like a great fit. So being a small team, we started with three main focus areas. One was observability. So this was to onboard teams to Datadog and encourage the use of tracing, metrics, and monitors, right? The next was incident response. So the idea here was to bring teams into PagerDuty, and which is the tool for on-call and being able to alert, wake up people out of their beds, all the fun stuff, and iterate on the incident and postmortem process. Also, so using postmortems as a valuable feedback loop was seen as a valuable thing. And the last kind of focus area was cloud reliability, kind of a broader term, but it was to help push on projects like our edge protection, WAF, Kubernetes adoption, and enabling high availability on various cloud services like Postgres, you name it. So two key motivations were, one, the visibility of all critical services that ran our business, And two, needing to better understand how service disruptions impacted our customers, our warehouse teams, and our drivers. So a lot of customers there. Now that we've got some goals set for SRE, it's time to start collecting data. First action item was to set up these cloud integrations. A lot of the other tools kind of support this, but Datadog does have a ton of these integrations with all. So we also happen to be privileged to be on 3 different clouds, not 2, but 3. So having this made a ton of sense for us. Just enabling those integrations. The integrations are can be fairly inexpensive to turn on because they're usually just pulling in metrics from the cloud providers. Parts of them can get expensive when you start monitoring hosts and things like that, VMs, but usually you can filter those out. So this is a great place to start regardless. Pull in those integrations, whether you're on AWS. The one catch with AWS, make sure you ignore function apps. Those get crazy expensive. But all the other metrics that you can pull in for AWS are super helpful. Or if you're using Azure, we'd love to kind of hear how many are using Azure. I would say most of our tech is on Azure. So if you have any questions around that, we can get into it more. But this allowed us to get our feet wet with dashboards and monitors and start onboarding teams. So also, this enabled a SRE team to alert on shared resources like Service Bus, app gateways. We've had with Istio, Service Mesh, various databases, right? So things are running out of disk, things like that. Number 2, log pipelines and Azure diagnostic logs. I don't know if anyone here is familiar with this, but there's a lot of services that in order to get more of an idea what's going on with some of these app services or even Service Bus, you name it, you have to pull in these diagnostic logs. So a great way to do that is, especially if you're on Azure, you set up an event hub and you send all your logs there, and then you can then ship those logs over to wherever. In our case, sending it over to Datadog to help get that information in there was great. App gateways logs were also a huge piece of this. As we're migrating off of kind of Azure App Services over to Kubernetes, and off of app gateways, we needed to know what was going on across the board. But one pro tip with Azure, if you are definitely use the US3 location, because if so, you have what is called like a partner integration with Datadog. And this allows you to basically for free get all your Azure diagnostic logs into, and also you're not paying too much for bandwidth because you're in the same data center. And we did not start off that way. I wish we did. It sort of happened like maybe 6 months after we started. They launched the Azure zone. So it was a lot more painful. We had to basically create like function apps to ship all those logs from the event hub over. That was kind of painful, to be honest. But little pro tip for you. Metrics from logs. So this is a concept that I believe there's a lot of telemetry or companies like Datadog that offer this. So the idea is that you can send them send over logs or data, and when that data is being ingested, you can then create metrics from it. So kind of like doing like a group by on like HTTP status for the logs. From that, you can get, without even indexing anything, you can get metrics that will, like a 15-month metric by just ingesting the logs and not even keeping them potentially. So Yeah, and as I mentioned earlier, with the app gateway logs being extremely important at this point, but this allowed us to actually create success rate and latency metrics and SLOs, and really leveled up our visibility on a daily basis, and also looking at weekly SLOs for latencies, and even month over month, we're able to catch a bunch of things kind of degrading as time goes on, which is kind of the main point of an SLO, a service level objective, to really see, because it's easy to see what is happening when you have big error spikes in a short span of time, but when those error spikes or those error levels start to gradually rise, those are tougher ones to either detect or prove, right? Because teams will always say, no, this was always this way, and things like that. So having the data is super important. So yeah, as we progressed, cleaning up resource tags was a big part of it. And also, for creating useful audits while the org was growing so fast. To be honest, I wish we spent more time on this, but we created some tagging standards and some examples in Terraform to prepare for our move to Kubernetes. And lastly, custom metrics, which quickly became our key indicators, or SLIs, for determining customer impact. And on that note, so at the top here, you've got a time series of 2 custom metrics here. The top one being order placed, which should be obvious, and orders delivered, right? So these were actually 2 of the first custom metrics we set up when we started the SRE team. Looking back, it's kind of crazy that we didn't have this like from the jump. Something that always comes up is sometimes you just overthink like telemetry and alerting, and you think like, oh, I just have to like put telemetry everywhere and then have all these signals, when really it could be as simple as just tracking, just a simple metric such as how many orders are being placed, or how many things are being, changed in status, right? So, but setting up these metrics was really simple. I could go into the tech if anyone's interested on how that was actually done, but it proved to be very handy during releases, major incidents, like what we're seeing here, and quickly became our most popular dashboard. Probably is still. This is on our checkout watcher dashboard, we call it. So you can see here that red line on the far right, that the order placed metric quickly dropped below the anomaly band, and as we had a disruption with our payment gateway. So, and very few customers could place an order. So also using the anomaly detection monitors, we were able to notify the proper teams as soon as this dropped below. So right at 3 o'clock there, 1500, you can see it starts to drop. So instead of waiting for someone in the business to say, hey, no one can process a payment, we were already in an incident. And yeah, from what I remember, this is a pretty costly outage, but it was a quick one. Let's see, what else do we have here? Yeah, so yeah, it was this result, we're able to resolve it in 20. So if you move forward in the timeline, you can see that the disruption was about 20 minutes. But what's interesting is like the lag we see on the orders delivered, right? So, the business was able to recover from this. And so that lag is because as orders stopped coming into the fulfillment centers, obviously the deliveries slowed down gradually. But then you see this big spike back up basically in 20 minutes, because everyone that was ordering, all of a sudden the orders were starting to go through. So we had a fairly big spike. I've actually seen much bigger spikes before. This wasn't at prime time. It was around 3 o'clock, 3:30. So if this were later in the night, the spike would be much more exaggerated. But but these metrics became even more useful when we applied tags like payment type, market area. So all our delivery zones are broken up by airport codes. So we can actually see, like, in those geographic areas where we may be seeing dips, and also country. So, which was was pretty key for our expansion into Europe, obviously. And of course, since these are metrics, they are retained for 15 months. We can also use them to do quick monthly or year-over-year trend analysis. Okay, so as we started gradually improve our visibility with logs and metrics, we still struggled with time to recovery, or MTTR, right? And knew we need more observability and structure across our services that were just growing very quickly day by day. As you start to hire, dozens of engineers every week, multiple dozens in some weeks, lots of new services get created, lots of new projects start. So our main goal was really to create a common conventions across our 60 plus teams at that point, which used over 4 different runtimes as well. So as you may know, OpenTelemetry, or OTel, is a collection of tools and standards used to instrument and generate telemetry data. We made the decision to adopt OTel because it was painfully obvious that we needed some open standard we could, proliferate across the org and feel good about it for the long term. The fact that it had a great support from CNCF and was vendor neutral really helped make it easier for our product teams to join us in this effort, right? Because they didn't feel like they were just signing up for Datadog. They felt like, oh, you know what, like, this is an open standard I can learn, get familiar with, and is portable, right? I think engineers care about that stuff. So this led to us to create our own library, or wrapper. We called it Puff Telemetry, as a opinionated set of APIs for metrics, logging, and tracing. So we actually created 4 Puff Telemetry packages. And I believe we're still at 4. One for Node.js, Go, Java, and Python, right? Each package included the OTel languages for tracing and auto instrumentation, opinionated, I call it, structured logging, right? So like each runtime sort of has their own opinions on how to structure your logs and conventions, right? And then you've got standardized tagging to help enforce naming conventions across all services, and also a common API for tracking custom metrics. Again, the fact that OTel was open source, vendor neutral, definitely helped with adoption, as it just relieved a lot of fears of having to rework telemetry in the future, if we change direction, right? I've been down that road in the past. It's painfully, it's a tough one. And to be honest, even Datadog when we started with OTel, they didn't even technically support. I can kind of walk you through how we got that to work, but we basically had to stand up our own collectors and send over the traces. But the funny thing is, a lot of the backends, even like App Insights, they're all based on OpenTelemetry, but they don't necessarily advertise that. But now the trend has totally changed, where they are very much, I would say, Dynatrace probably led the way with that adoption, and then now it's sort of a feature box on every telemetry cloud provider. So So when we first launched, we actually stood up our, like I was saying, for each environment, and used the Datadog OTel exporter for the traces and metrics. So about 5 or 6 months ago, actually probably like 9 months ago, Datadog did add OTel ingestion support to their agent. So now we've been in moving over to the agent, the Datadog agent now, so it's all supported. Okay, another stream of work that we were pushing on was incident response. Doesn't always sound super fun, but you know, our incident process of 2 years ago was essentially a Slack command that created a Zoom call and notified engineers to join the call, and work through the issue. That worked fairly well for 30, 50 engineer org. We then after the incident was resolved, we'd create like a doc in Confluence or Google Docs, who knows, right? And then we would kind of schedule the postmortem. But we definitely grew out of that process as it lacked tracking and ability to see the frequency of incidents, let alone our time to recovery. It also didn't allow for severity incidents, lower severity incidents to be created, which made those smoldering fires far less visible to everyone. So this was the motivation for Puff incident, right? Kind of seeing a pattern here. So Puff incident was just a Slack command that was backed by our own service that would create the PagerDuty and Datadog incident that we could iterate on, right? So the idea is really having our tool that we could improve upon and to create all the data and automations that we needed for this process to work well. Above, you can see on the slide, you can see that the dialog is launched by our Slack command. We added the ability for the user to also send this notification to a specific Slack channel, which can help increase visibility of the incident. But this form also allows the user to include the impacted service, which will trigger some automations like notify the on-call engineer for that service and display the ingress or K8 service SLOs. Right, so here is the custom notification that we sent out to multiple Slack channels. There's a bit going on here, and to be honest, it's actually changed a bit since the slide, but at the top you'll see that the description, the severity, a link to the Datadog and PagerDuty incidents, and the Zoom call, right? So, and we list any of the teams we automatically notified. So below the fold here, we'll post a list of releases that occurred in the past hour in the Slack channel, things like order volume at that time, and also the ingress failure rate or success rate, SLO. So this is an important part of what we call like setting the table for the incident, and we're actively improving on this. So yeah. So the Datadog incident itself that's created is primarily used for our incident commander during and after the incident. So there's a couple things to mention here. One is the detection method. This can be frequently forgotten about, but regardless of root cause, this helps point out like if we had a gap in monitoring, if the incident was detected by an employee, a customer, because that's not good, right? We want to avoid that. We want to have make sure that we're closing those gaps on observability and monitoring, right? Impact is of course key for setting the priority of the postmortem, right? If something only impacted up 1% of customers is a different story, right? That would be more like a step 3, and we'd probably downgrade it. But we can use this time range to determine our our MTTR, or time to recovery, over the long term. So we do a monthly, quarterly report, and we always track what that time, because that time ultimately adds up to dollars for us. So having a good track on that is pretty important. And also customer happiness. You know, how many customers did we annoy this past month, right? It's the only way to get better. So once we have this, all this info on the resolved incident, we are typically in a good spot to, as you see the arrow there, generate postmortem and create follow-up tasks. And we create them in Jira, which is really where the tough work begins, right? So going through all this, you're not going to figure everything out and solve all the problems in the postmortem, but you at least want to have 3 items, to follow up on. But I really can't stress enough how postmortems have been such a valuable feedback loop for us. Whether some of these issues are going to take a month to fix or a day, effective postmortems won't happen overnight, but putting in a process and iterating on it has definitely made us improve noticeably. So next we have our service catalog, my personal favorite kind of part of this. We started to really focus on the service catalog as it was needed for automations, right? During the rapid growth of teams, we also had a rapid growth of services and needed to understand how critical they were and their upstream and downstream dependencies. We also ran into cases of orphan services that needed either support or retirement. So this services sprawl was really tough to stay on top of, and frankly, just caused a lot of stress. Also, we lacked a way to automate alerts on the new services and infrastructure that popped up on a weekly basis. So there are 4 main components to getting our service catalog operational. So one of the things is Airtable. So to get things going, we created an Airtable. It was basically our common place for managers, leads to edit their team data, which are all tagged on a tier level. All the services are tagged on a tier level, and also a link to like the PagerDuty escalation, right? So then we have the Puff directory service, where we created our own HTTP service we called Puff directory API, which we use to fetch info about the catalog, such as teams and services, which is now used for many of our automations, right? So let's see. All right. So this data is also represented. So the data from the Puff directory API is used to publish this document, which is a Confluence page. So we have this Confluence publisher that is able to kind of take that data and auto-generate these pages and update them when Airtable gets updated. This was definitely a kind of a quick way to get this going. We are looking at other tools such as Backstage right now. We actually have it somewhat implemented, but a lot of teams actually like being able to use Confluence just to go into the page, see the links without having to go through Backstage. I don't know if everyone's familiar with it, but it's a bit, very Spotify built it. It's a great tool, but it just it's I don't know what the word is. It's you have to learn how to use it, right? Like uses very ambiguous terms like entities and things like that. So, and kind of like the last piece of this is PagerDuty. So the PagerDuty escalation link here that is used for a few key automations, right? In Puff Incident, when you're adding a responder to an incident, and also just various automated alerts via the PagerDuty event orchestration, we use that a bit. So by having this structure in place of services to PagerDuty services, right, we're actually able to, when there's an issue with a service, easily page the team and also with the incident. So even if an incident is a Sev 3 and doesn't necessarily wake me up in the morning, right? So if it's not high impact enough to alert the entire org, essentially, you can create like a Sev 3 incident and then just notify the team that, hey, this service definitely, maybe it's not affecting 10% of our revenue at the time, but could lead to a bigger issue. And this is something that needs attention at, at the team level. Yeah, we also have, orchestrations built off of just error rate, off of ingress, and also the P90 latency. They're all kind of orchestrated through this service catalog. So we actually have we actually built a custom front end to it. So we're not using Confluence anymore. We actually have a React app that basically displays all this data now, but don't have a screenshot for you, sorry. Okay, what are we doing on time? Okay, let's see. Yeah, so lessons learned. Don't wait to automate. Must be true because it rhymes. So you'll likely never have perfect constraints. Like if you don't have a service catalog, or maybe you just don't have any kind of structure in your org, don't wait to automate. You learn a lot from just going through that process of trying to automate things and finding out that, yeah, we really need a structure for our services, or you know what, Kubernetes would be great for this type of automation. So yeah, get after it. And yeah, testing is obvious on, in most projects, but having an end-to-end testing process is, for your incident response process is often overlooked. So be able to test it, build it out so that you can test that flow, and don't just use it as like a tool that you only, break in case of emergency, but you actually test that process and make changes to it. Number 3, level up from your logs. Join the OTel initiative and help others see the power of metrics and tracing, is the way I would put it. Let's move on from logging. It's always going to be around and helpful, but there's so many advantages to distributed tracing and metrics, and just kind of shifting your mind a bit around those concepts. Would have to do a whole nother 40 minutes just on that, but yeah. Number 4, encourage engineers to declare more incidents. As I was saying a little earlier, we actually have, you can create a Sev 3 or Sev 4 incident, which may seem, I guess, counterproductive, but this is how this is kind of how engineers get better at knowing the process and learning to communicate severity and priority. This also gives greater visibility to what teams are having issues and things like that. So practice makes perfect. Like the more incidents you declare, the better you're going to get at it. And also all the teams will kind of know what the process is when a Sev 1 does hit, right? Number 5. So yeah, overall strategy has been full service ownership and keeping SRE focused, aka small, focused on automation and standards across engineering. So full service ownership may seem to put extra burden on product teams, like learning how to run their own clusters and things like that. But really, this helps build a culture of ownership and accountability. Some of the instances I've seen where the reasons for that push against full service ownership is like, oh, well, we don't want to give like every engineer access, kubectl access to our cluster. And like, there's a technical way to solve that I think some engineering departments will kind of deprioritize, when I feel like that is the bigger problem to solve. Like, teams should be able to deploy their own services. They should be able to roll their own pods. They should be able to roll back, all on their own. And, it helps just build that culture. And this is my team. We are hiring. So if anyone's interested, reach out and let everyone else know, please. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Brad.
Questions?
Yeah, I got a quick one. I had to step out for a quick second and when you were describing the P1 stuff, so I might have missed it, but how much debate was there for, defining what is a P1 versus a P2, and how did you guys align on that, like, organizationally?
Yeah, so honestly, we so it's Sev1. We like, as far as incidents, it's Sev1, Sev2. We have Sev1, 2, 3, and 4. So Sev1 was we just literally, I just created a Confluence doc and said, these are the parameters where, this is like all hands on deck. Now, if I go back to trying to think. So as you can see on this slide, like Sev3 is minor customer business impact. So it's around 1%. So we essentially just said, hey, let's lay down some parameters. They changed over time. I mean, like, for example, when we first put them out there, it was all based around order, but we all around how many orders are being impacted or customers are being impacted. So we looked at that metric. We basically use this metric, order placed, as a way to gauge, okay, we are 10% down, or more than 10% down would technically be Sev2, sorry, Sev1, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in that 1% to 10% range, we're like at a Sev2, which there really isn't a huge difference there. Either way, it's all hands on deck, but it at least gives some visibility that, like, hey, we're not completely down, like
Sure.
a lot of Sev1 situations. And so it changed over time because we were very focused on order volume at first, and then and also delivery volume. But then we also have new teams that are very much focused on ad revenue. So it wound up becoming more of a metric around the revenue over the course of time. So yeah, so percentage of revenue impact really helped determine that. And like I said earlier, like, just encouraging teams, actually, like, having that Sev3 switch where you're not going to like wake everyone up, but you're at least declaring it, and someone else could possibly see it and be like, no, this is a Sev2, like, you know what I mean? Which happens all the time, for good or for worse. And there's even sometimes, which you could imagine, a Sev1 gets pulled and we de-escalate down to a Sev3. That happens a lot too. But at least we have that. You have to have a process for it, or some parameters to, like, so when you actually create the incident, I'm trying to think if it's on the screenshot or not. Yeah, you'll see severity matrix. There's a link there. You click into that and it'll show like all that spelled out, and kind of how we determine what severity the incident is.
Right on. That's great.
Yep.
And I just wanted to comment from personal experience at KBRA that I completely agree with the ideas of, you have to practice incidents and make them not scary for folks.
Yeah.
It is absolutely critical. Doing tabletop exercises, doing, having people like make notifications through the, PagerDuty or OpsGenie or whatever it is that you're using to familiarize with, the process. Like, you got to do it. It's just part of the deal. And then owning the service ownership piece is also important. Very, very important. I feel like they make that is probably the most important and makes the biggest difference on how a team feels empowered on owning and building their things.
Yep. Yeah, this even goes into like chaos engineering a bit, where we've asked our security teams to, and they thoroughly enjoy this, by the way, but just like launching like a DDoS attack on our own site at like 8 in the morning. We said, yeah, just pick a day and do it. And that's a great way to test. We found all kinds of issues doing that, just like how easily like we could take down our own homepage just because like no one tried it before, and yeah, stuff like that was insanely easy to resolve.
Mhm.
Any other cues? Anyone here use Datadog or use any other tools for this stuff? Like what are you using at your places for?
KBRA has Datadog and
Oh yeah.
Ops Genie.
Yeah, okay. I was actually thinking about moving to Ops Genie a little while ago. The PagerDuty bill is rough.
Yeah.
Really.
I think they're part of the Atlassian tool suite now, so.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's like, you get some discount. I don't know if
Yeah.
it's the same, but it's a pretty decent product. Does a lot of, similar things, postmortems, tracking, integrations with your phones and phone lines and messaging and all that stuff. What you would expect for an alerting software.
Yeah. I'd imagine Datadog is probably working on something. I think I've been hinted at that because I already have the Datadog app on my phone. So it would be nice if they just need to build out like the scheduling or the schedule and the teams and all that, And that's one thing that Datadog was smart about is like from the get-go, it's always been like, yeah, like they don't charge per user. They want like your entire org to get on there, which is smart. Whereas like PagerDuty is the exact opposite. They're like hitting you for every single user, whether or not they even use it. It's kind of painful, but yeah.
Yeah. There's problems with the Datadog model though, in terms of like, you got to keep an eye on it because you could spend a lot of money without paying attention.
Yeah. I kind of glossed over those cost controls, but there are some nice, I don't know if every account has them, but they have what's called logging without limits. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but and they do the same thing for metrics and traces. So you can limit your cost by just reducing the amount that you're indexing, right? On all those, on metrics, logs, and traces. So it's pretty good. Like we'll kind of like mess with the indexing and like see if teams notice, unfortunately, like hey, like but like really you shouldn't be, like the metrics are what you should be focused on for counts. Like if you want to see volume, you should be looking at metrics, not like the amount of logs, right? So there's things like that that can change your spend. Now yeah, we still spend a ton of money on Datadog every year, but
yeah,
we've more or less cut it in half, like in the past couple of months, by just using
tweaking the
indexing, traces, and metrics too, because metrics are pretty expensive. Like, so if you hit high cardinality on a metric, like someone's logging like user ID to a metric, it blows up the metric and the cost will go through the roof. And the math is like, I have like a little calculator somewhere. It's like, I think it's like 4.5 cents per metric or something like that per hour. It's how they bill it. So if you can just go in and drop one of those tags and it'll reduce a ton. And then you just go back to that team and say, hey, this metric was, the cardinality exploded on this metric and it's costing $1,000 a day. So go fix it. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
Yeah. And I guess, we've had those conversations around like tracking metrics in other ways, like not getting away from getting away from Datadog and using Prometheus, which we use Prometheus for some things, but it's just trade-offs there, I guess.
Yeah. We did a trade-off we use Graylog for some of our infrastructure logging just to save some money, not having it be in Datadog.
Yeah, another good one I've been talking to is Circonus, which is a Philly-based startup. So I've been talking them up a bit, but they have like an on-prem solution you can even run, or in your own cloud. So obviously that's going to have some advantages. I mean, we pay a ton just for egress, right? So having it in your own cloud makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
That's also a good model.
Cool.
Yep.
Anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, I guess I had one. Can you talk a little bit about how the executive leadership got bought in? Were they already kind of behind this idea? Were they driving it? Was this something that you kind of had to solve in?
Yeah, it's kind of like they were more focused on, like, they didn't even think a lot of these real-time metrics were possible for some reason. So like this is a perfect example. Like Ed, you are
Mm.
there you go. All right, so yeah, we have these numbers, but on a much more delayed, right? Like I believe, so we use Looker and Snowflake, a bunch of tools for this kind of data, but it's delayed by hours, right? So it never really occurred to them, like, oh, if we had this data in real time, it can actually be pretty powerful. So it's like, and we actually will reconcile, like, to make sure that this metric is accurate, like look at yesterday's data in Looker or Snowflake, and we can kind of make sure, like, yeah, they're pretty close. They're not exact, but they're really close. So but to answer your question, like, they were probably not really super focused on this, but it was sort of something that engineering management knew was an obvious problem. But yeah, and now it's shown that it gives a ton of value, just because it's changed like the culture so much, just from like data focused. And I would say, like, even open telemetry, there's some not so great things about it. Like, it's fairly new kind of API and set of standards, but like that's a pretty cool problem to solve. Is like, we could move to another provider tomorrow, or we could just start sending some of our traces to another back end and do other things with it, right? It's just it makes everything more portable. But the idea of the SRE team itself wasn't really on their radar, but it was kind of another way of saying, hey, it's kind of easy to sell. It's like, hey, we want to increase our reliability, right? It's like, yep, we're losing lots of money because of these outages, so let's fix it, right? But again, our team is super small. There's 5 of us. Like, I've heard of other orgs that have had 30 plus engineers on their SRE team, and it's not totally uncommon, but we're taking that approach of just a small group of engineers that can automate, but then the ownership is really still on the teams. Like, we're not here to kind of like ship code or put to gatekeep or anything like that. We're just kind of in the background.
You're a platform team.
Yeah. Yep. Cheers.
Okay. Question for you. So we may be looking at telemetry at the shop that I'm working at, or .NET shop, if that matters. Going through an evolutionary process. The temptation here is to potentially jump straight to open telemetry. When I hear people talk about traces and logs, to me, these are all events, and they should simply follow. We should define them as a data structure, and where we persist them, How we process them is secondary once we can start to identify them and produce. It's a resource we can play with a million different ways. So overall, what are your thoughts in terms of what my priorities should be once I get to the point of being able to act on that? I have other things on my plate in the moment.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can start, the first step is really to like start instrumenting your app, right? That's always the toughest part to get over, and figuring out kind of like how to tag some of your resources, naming conventions. It kind of, as soon as you start with OpenTelemetry, it definitely forces some conventions that maybe you hadn't thought of. But I mean, the way I look at the OpenTelemetry is really it's an API of all the world's software, like telemetry around how all different, like you've got Express, you've got Go, right? How do you instrument those things so you have, they're not going to be exactly one-to-one, but you can use certain signals like, latency, like durations and status codes and things like that across all your services. Maybe that's not a huge problem for a lot of companies, but there's definitely like a sweet spot. Can you get away with just, simple metrics? Possibly. It depends kind of like on your scale, but once you get into like having hundreds of services, it's kind of like you really need it. Hopefully that answers your question a little bit.
A little bit. I think for us, the low-hanging fruit may actually be there are diagnostic events that are generated when somebody goes through web access, and just grabbing those and just routing them straight into this kind of a framework to an endpoint so that we can start having them on hand.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, if you look at some of the OTel stuff, there's some really good, like the OTel collector is essentially like a Kafka collector, and then it exports, it has an exporter, right? So you can ingest events, export, like if you look at that, you can basically take that and do all kinds of things with it. So it's good tech to just play around with, because you don't have to send it to Datadog. Obviously you can send it to, you can send it to what's the thing that we use, Jaeger, right? So that's actually what we use locally, like when we're deving locally, or obviously we don't want to send it to Datadog when we're deving locally, so we'll stand up a Jaeger incident, a local dev instance of Jaeger, and kind of look at the traces through there. There's all kinds of other tools you can use too, but that's kind of the nice part about OpenTelemetry is that it's everywhere.
So it sounds like once you get into this, it's going to kind of drive you in the direction of third-party tools for the aggregation and analysis.
I would say, I mean, most of it, it's a CNCF project, right? So you can definitely go with Prometheus, right? You can use in-house tools for sure.
I guess that comes down to a buy versus, or either a buy or a learn versus a build. Where do you come down with that in terms of just getting your feet wet?
You build for sure. You're gonna learn more from that, I would say. But because you can build this stuff on a small scale, like you can just string together a couple open source tools, and you have a fairly decent way of looking at traces for your service. Pretty simple. But then the nice thing is when you grow out of that, the core pieces can extend to Dynatrace, or maybe you just build your own cluster. You know what I mean? There's all kinds of options.
Got it. Yeah. Once you've got all these things as basically events with data, it doesn't matter what you're consuming them with, you still have them to work. Yeah, got it. So basically start simple, focus most of the effort on figuring out what kind of events that we can we can raise in order to get the most advantage going forward. And the tools as simple as we can get that still gets us a useful result at the end of the day. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, yeah,
Thank you.
sure. All right. Going once, twice.
All right, sounds good. Well, Brad, thanks so much for
Sure.
participating and sharing this information. Yeah, as Anthony mentioned, it's being recorded. Brad will get the slides and we'll share them on our meetup group. And I appreciate the participation from everybody in the crowd, and we look forward to seeing you in the next event.
Cool. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Brad.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, appreciate it. Take care, everybody.